Welcome to this explainer. You know, from the time we're little kids, the instruction is pretty much constant. Be kind, be agreeable, make sure you're easy to work with. But nobody really tells you what happens when you take that advice just a little too far. So let's dive straight into the unexpected and frankly deeply costly consequences of simply trying to be nice.
Let's kick things off with a pretty harsh reality. You might think that being endlessly accommodating is the ultimate cheat code to win friends and influence people. But the source material reveals a completely different outcome. When you're constantly agreeable, instead of being rewarded or appreciated, people actually just start ignoring you. Over time, almost without you noticing, your respect slowly disappears. It's wild, but somehow the nicer you are, the worse you get treated. So what's really going on beneath the surface of these everyday interactions?
Section 1. The Illusion of Niceness, the Hidden Trap.
To really understand why this backfires so badly, we have to recognize a fundamental distinction. See, simply being nice, that isn't the actual problem. Being too nice is. Constant agreement is very often just a mask we wear to hide our true needs. We put it on strictly to be liked by the people around us. But projecting this false front completely strips away our authenticity. It hides what we actually think and what we actually need, projecting a facade that others subconsciously learn they just can't trust, mostly because it lacks real substance.
There's a massive structural difference here we need to look at. Genuine kindness is generosity as a deliberate choice. It comes from a place of real strength. But when your kindness comes strictly from a desperate need for approval, well, people don't see generosity. They see weakness. Now, they might not process this consciously, but psychologically, approval-seeking behavior is immediately categorized by others as a lack of inner strength.
Section 2. Respect versus likability.
The predictability trap. Here's a truth most of us go out of our way to avoid. Likability does not automatically equal respect. In fact, if you prioritize likability above absolutely everything else, you are almost certainly going to sacrifice your respect in the process. Let's break down exactly how that loss of respect happens through what researchers call the predictability trap. If you consistently say yes, avoid conflict, and never set boundaries, you become highly predictable. And here's why that is so dangerous. Predictable people are extremely easy to overlook. There's no mystery, no friction, no edge to your personality. You literally just become part of the background furniture in other people's lives.
Look at it this way. Conflict avoidance is basically like keeping little paper boats safely separated on a perfectly calm, undisturbed lake. Now, you might think keeping the water this smooth is a great thing, but keeping that much distance between yourself and any potential disagreement, it completely stops real connection from ever forming. By avoiding conflict entirely, you're keeping everyone at arm's length. The water is calm, sure, but those boats are never actually going to interact. Real respect actually requires making a few waves.
Section 3. The hidden silent trade. Sacrifice for acceptance.
Okay, let's unpack this subconscious bargain that people pleasers are constantly trying to make with the world around them. The internal monologue goes a little something like this. I'll sacrifice my needs so you'll accept me. This tragic, completely invisible transaction is happening every single day. The problem is, this trade literally never works long-term. You're offering up your own well-being and your own boundaries as currency to buy acceptance, but the world simply does not honor this currency the way you think it will.
It really just boils down to a harsh economic reality applied to human relationships. People value what feels earned, not what is freely given. Availability dictates value. If you're entirely available, always accommodating, and never require anyone to put in an ounce of effort to earn your time or your agreement, you inherently lower your own value in their eyes. The more available you are without any resistance, the less valuable you seem to everyone else.
Section 4. The Psychology of Reactance. Challenge and Status.
To really grasp why this silent trade fails so spectacularly, we need to take a look at the wiring of the human brain itself. The brain acts a lot like an intricate maze, constantly and subconsciously navigating every single interaction. As we move through social dynamics, our brains are continuously evaluating the people we meet for two main things: challenge and status. How we present ourselves within this maze dictates exactly how others are going to categorize us. Enter psychological reactance. This is a psychological concept where a lack of resistance is perceived as a lack of challenge, resulting in zero respect, and this is exactly why the too nice approach completely fails. When people feel absolutely no resistance from you, they feel no challenge, and without challenge, respect simply does not form. If you bend to their every whim without a second thought, you're depriving their brain of the friction it requires to actually register you as an equal worthy of respect.
So this leads straight into a subconscious process of status ranking. Step 1. People observe your behavior. Step 2. They note your constant accommodation. And Step 3. They assign you a lower status. And here's the real kicker. This happens not because you actually are lower in status, but simply because your behavior is telling them you are. You're essentially voluntarily placing yourself at the bottom of the social hierarchy.
Section 5. The power of boundaries. Building true respect.
So how do we fix this whole mess? Well, the ultimate solution is understanding that respect is not built on compliance. It's built strictly on boundaries. Boundaries are the resistance that creates the challenge, which in turn actually generates respect. Setting firm boundaries pulls you right out of that violent emotional storm of constant people-pleasing and lets you actively balance the scales of mutual respect. You finally stop being tossed around by the weather of other people's demands, and you plant your feet firmly on the ground.
Leaving that illusion of niceness in the dust is incredibly empowering. Setting boundaries allows you to walk right out of that predictability trap. It empowers you to step forward into healthy interactions and relationships where your true value is actually recognized and honored rather than just freely consumed by everyone else. I'm going to leave you with a final thought to mull over regarding your own interactions going forward. Take a close look at your own life. Are you going to continue the silent trade, sacrificing your needs just to be accepted, or will you start building true, lasting respect through the power of boundaries? The choice of how you show up in the world is entirely yours.
You know, we often completely confuse being a good, kind person with being limitlessly accommodating. It's a super common trap. But today, in this explainer, we're going to completely shift how you navigate your daily life by exploring this incredible concept called the sovereign heart. So what does that actually mean? Well, it basically means stepping up and becoming the ruler of your own emotional domain. We're going to fundamentally reframe what true strength looks like in our everyday interactions. We really need to dismantle this idea that saying yes to absolutely everything makes you a better person. Because, spoiler alert, it doesn't. Instead, we're going to uncover the very real psychological traps of conflict avoidance, and way more importantly, discover how to find genuine, unshakable strength in setting boundaries. Okay, let's dive right into this.
It might seem peaceful to just drift far apart from someone when things get tense, right? Just keep the waters totally placid. But that right there perfectly captures what we call the trap of conflict avoidance. Honestly, so many of us, especially if you're someone who identifies as being too nice, we spend our entire lives navigating exactly like this. We see someone approaching with a differing opinion or maybe an unfair expectation, and we immediately steer away. We dodge the conflict at literally all costs. We convince ourselves, hey, by not making waves, I'm keeping the peace. But actually, scratch that. What we're really doing is isolating ourselves and avoiding the messy reality of human interaction. We think we're protecting the relationship, but we're actually just steering it into this state of permanent emotional distance. And that brings us to a core truth that just completely flips our normal understanding of peace right on its head. Here it is. Avoiding conflict doesn't create peace. It creates silent resentment. I really want you to just let the heavy reality of those two words sink in for a second. Silent resentment. When you swallow your genuine feelings just to avoid an argument, those feelings don't just magically disappear. They don't evaporate into thin air. They settle right in your stomach. They fester. The peace you think you're creating is entirely superficial, because on the outside, sure, everything looks calm, but on the inside, a totally toxic buildup is happening. You actually begin to quietly resent the very people you're trying so hard to please simply because you won't allow yourself to be honest with them. So how does this silent resentment actually build up in the real world? Let's walk through these steps together, because this is where the theory hits our daily reality. Step 1. Saying yes when you desperately mean no. Come on, we've all been there. Your plate is already completely full, but you take on that extra task anyway. Step 2. Smiling when you're actually deeply frustrated. You just paste on this happy expression to mask all that irritation bubbling right beneath the surface. Step 3. Agreeing when you fundamentally disagree. You just nod along with an opinion you totally oppose just to avoid the friction of a debate. Now, individually, these seem like really small, polite concessions. But step 4 is where the compounding effect hits you. Losing yourself. When you consistently overwrite your own truth, your own limits, and your own voice just to make other people comfortable, the ultimate casualty isn't just your time or your energy, it's literally your identity. You lose track of who you actually are.
And all this constant avoidance, it takes a massive physical and mental toll. It becomes this mask of fake agreement. When you're living in a state of constant conflict avoidance, your face basically becomes a facade. You're putting on this rigid, impenetrable mask every single time you interact with someone. And let me tell you, It is completely exhausting to wear a mask this heavy every single day. Just think about the sheer amount of psychological energy it takes to constantly police your own reactions, suppress your true thoughts, and project this artificial state of agreement 24/7. It just drains you. And even worse, it completely prevents anyone from ever connecting with the real you, because all they're ever interacting with is this carefully constructed, agreeable mask.
So how do we break free from this? Well, we need to completely redefine what it actually means to be strong and to set a boundary. So many people are absolutely terrified of boundaries because they equate them with being loud or rude or aggressive. They think setting a limit means picking a fight. But the reality? It's entirely different. True strength isn't loud at all. It's controlled. It's clear. It's grounded. You do not need to suddenly become this mean or abrasive person just to protect your energy. You just need to become incredibly clear. It's that vital shift from reacting emotionally to responding with absolute clarity. That is where your true power lies.
You see, real strength is not about raising a fist in anger or aggression to strike someone down. It's an inner fortitude. Think of it like a personal energy field, established by crystal clear standards for exactly how you will allow yourself to be treated. The absolute crucial point here is that true strength is anchored in unshakable self-respect. When your boundaries are clear, they act like an invisible protective barrier. They guard your peace without you ever having to throw a single punch. When you possess that deep, clear self-respect, you simply don't need to yell to be heard. Your simple, quiet no carries the weight of absolute certainty. And believe me, people feel that energy. They respect it because it comes from a place of solid grounding, not from volatility.
And, sometimes that grounded strength is expressed not in what you say, but in what you actively choose not to participate in. A huge part of this controlled strength we're talking about is knowing exactly when to stay silent and when you just need to walk away. Listen to me, you do not have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to endlessly explain your boundaries to people who are completely committed to misunderstanding them. Part of having a sovereign heart is recognizing that your peace is a top priority. And walking away from a toxic dynamic or a totally unreasonable demand, that is literally one of the most powerful, definitive ways you can communicate your limits.
Now, if you're sitting there worried that setting boundaries means you're going to stop being a nice person, remember this. The goal here isn't aggression, it's balance. You can absolutely be kind, but you must ensure you aren't being passive. You can and definitely should be respectful, but that does not mean you have to be submissive. You can be wonderfully generous with your time and your love, but you absolutely must draw the line at being self-sacrificing. This right here is the powerful equilibrium we are striving for. It's taking your absolute best traits and finally adding a backbone to them so they can never, ever be exploited again.
And when you finally find that equilibrium, when you make that shift from just passive agreement to setting clear boundaries, the scales of your relationships finally balance out into perfect equity. It's amazing to watch. A profound transformation happens. The exact moment people realize that you're no longer going to simply tolerate everything they throw at you, the dynamic fundamentally changes. They actually begin treating you completely differently. And it's not out of fear. It's because you have effectively trained them on how to treat you. You've commanded a totally new level of interaction that's based on mutual respect, rather than endless, exhausting accommodation.
Which brings us to a very uncomfortable but absolutely vital hard truth. I'm actually going to say this a bit slower because it goes against literally everything we're taught as kids. Being too nice makes people value you less. It's a total paradox, isn't it? You'd think that endless accommodation would make you invaluable, but human psychology just doesn't work that way. When you are always available, always agreeable, and you never have any limits whatsoever, people unconsciously begin to take you for granted. Your time and your energy actually lose their perceived value because there's this infinite, unprotected supply of them. It doesn't mean your kindness is fundamentally wrong at all. It just means that without parameters, it becomes undervalued.
So if you remember only one single thing from our time together today in this explainer, please let it be this. Respect requires limits. It is a fundamental law of human interaction. We naturally respect things that have defined edges, things that stand firm, things that have a distinct shape. When you define your limits, you are defining your shape to the world. You're telling people exactly where they end and where you begin. And without those limits, mutual respect is literally impossible to sustain. Boundaries aren't these massive walls designed to keep people out. They are simply the instruction manual for how people can safely and respectfully interact with you.
So, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. We've uncovered the trap of avoidance, the absolute exhaustion of wearing that mask, and the incredible, balanced power of real boundaries. The next time you find yourself in that familiar, split-second moment,
The next time you feel the pressure building and you're just about to automatically say yes to something, I want you to hit pause. Just pause and ask yourself this one provocative question. Do I mean it, or am I just trying to be liked? Be brutally honest with yourself about the answer. Because the moment you choose meaning over merely being liked, you have taken the first true step toward reclaiming your sovereign heart.